Hey babies, hey babies, hey babies. Hi everyone, hi everyone, hi everyone. I'm going to start with football today because you guys told me to, but but I'm spending a lot of time on Maryland in a little bit. So I'm warning all of you
As you should.
because we got a full-on Palace coup and I've heard you, I've listened to you. Don't ever say I don't listen to you. I will start with Deebo and Michael Gallup and all the stuff that's going on with the Commanders because I do have some things to say about it. But we're going to spend some time today on Maryland because I didn't see this coming. I didn't know that Kevin Willard was the Judas and he was going to stab everybody in the back, and I'm down for it. So I'm pumped. I think it's terrible it's happening on the day that they're going into the NCAA tournament for the first time in a while where they have some literal expectations on them. But because I hate that distraction is happening today, but it's probably been going on for a few days. And honestly, Derek Queen is playing his last games with them anyway. So what's the difference at this point? YOLO. But I'm just warning everybody, I'm going to spend an inordinate amount of time on Maryland today because I'm fascinated by what's going on there. So that's that.
When this broke, I even had to take 10 minutes on my show to talk about it. And you know how I feel about Maryland and how I feel about that scene. Mm-hmm. But that was a bombshell yesterday when the news broke. So
bombshell. Full on. I've yet to ever hear a coach explain where an AD is going publicly or he has stated where he's going. I guess for the Maryland people, it's an open secret, but I've never at an NCAA tournament press conference to announce his AD will be somewhere else. Boy, that was a new one to me. And that shows you who's boss over there. We just learned that one real fast. All right. Yep. I will get to that in a minute. Deebo showed up. Deebo got his new contract. Deebo did a contract, and I will say Deebo over and over because he says Deebo over and over. He is our resident I speak in third person player. I'm kind of pumped about it. And there were just two things that stood out about the mini press conference he did in availability. I will say this for the team. Every single person that's re-signed, they've done a Zoom with all the reporters. You get to hear from them. I didn't talk a lot about Javon Kinlaw, but he had full glasses, total chill mode. I didn't get to talk about first impressions on him. For Deebo, I got exactly what I thought I would get. One, he's a big star. Two, he did that Netflix series and I saw a lot of him. So I'm not surprised he acted this way, but he just gets out there and he's like, Deebo's going to tell you what Deebo's up to. And there were two things that were important on this, which was, and I think the most important one was because people had to ask this as you were walking out the door, you got hit over the head with, you are out of shape or, maybe on some level fat. And he had to address that. And his answer to that was, that doesn't concern me.
Yep. Yeah. Basically, and that was it. It was that's nothing to me. I'm not worried about that. I think that might've been the quote, but that was my favorite quote of the whole entire presser was, I'm not going to address that. I do not care. I'm just going to go ball. That's pretty much what he said.
Deebo and Luka have this in common with each other. We're walking out the door. People had some questions about whether they have the right diet or maybe work out enough. And then, I don't know, last time I checked, Luka scored 21 in the first quarter last night. So most people don't average 21 for a game. So I'm going to go with he's okay. Those whatever that pizza he ate isn't bothering him that much. And Deebo's the same way. He is at his best a Pro Bowl receiver. I'm going to go with he knows how to handle his business.
I'm going to go with when Deebo Samuel gets the ball, DBs are usually afraid of him. So I'll just continue to go with that concept.
Yes. The other one thing that he brought up was this. He said he's motivated, which is very good, which I think is also semi-admitting he wasn't a year ago. I think he's semi-admitting that. I don't want to put words in his mouth. I don't want to put words in Deebo's mouth. Third person Deebo doesn't need words put in his mouth. But when you just say something like that, it does kind of insinuate that last year, the motivation might not have been there to the degree it was. And look how the season played out for them. They had a million injuries, which is what really, really derailed them. But he also didn't have the type of season that we're accustomed to seeing. And by December, there were a lot of weird questions, where he said those things where he's like, well, I got to get the ball to actually make plays. And then he started getting the ball and he had a bunch of drops. And so I think mentally he was probably off. And I think this is somewhat of an admission of that, and which is probably what did lead to, y'all want me to go, I need to go, let me go find somewhere else. And you agree with me. We had a bad, rough end here, but let's shake hands and be friends about this for forever, because one day you are going to put my name up in your Ring of Honor and you know it.
Yeah. I mean, I looked at this one more because I had kind of come to this conclusion. That was more about the second half of the season, not the entire season. That this injury started to stack up for that team so much that I think the players just kind of knew within themselves, this isn't going to be the Super Bowl run that we thought it was going to be. Like, we're not going to be able to run this back. And it was because he was hurt. Trent Williams was going in and out of the lineup. Of course, McCaffrey was banged up basically the entire season. Ayuk got season ended real quick, right? Like first 4 weeks of the season, something like that. Like, I really thought too, like, and I'm not trying to hold it to him personally, because I think the whole team had a little bit of a problem with that. Was I think after week 6, 7, 8, something like that, that whole team was like, we know what it takes to get there. We don't have it this year. Like,
that's right.
We are not it this year. And I thought he was one of the people that was one of the culprits that basically kind of tapped out for the year. And I think that happens from time to time. And I try not to like judge a player too harshly on that, especially on a season that's lost. But I'm glad that he did say, I'm motivated now, and he wanted to be with winners, and that he talked about Jaden Daniels extensively about, playing with a guy like that. I think this was one that I said from a mile away. It's the old hockey trade. Change of scenery does you a wonder.
That's
a
right.
Wonder of good. And this is how I've always felt about it. So I'm glad he did say that.
Yeah, and he wrote about this in the Players Tribune. I don't think I ever spoke about that article, but I read it. And he kind of admitted this again yesterday, too. He said, I was happy to hear him say this. He goes, it was not easy to go to them to say it's time for a trade, but we both agreed. Like, so it wasn't we have these hard feelings for one another, or I'm a problem or you're a problem, or we just don't get along anymore. We've just hit a natural endpoint. And I think he's also seeing what John Lynch talked about, which I'll get to in a second, which is explaining a reset, like what they were doing, explaining the reset. And he don't want to be part of that. Like he's at a point in his career where he goes, I want to be somewhere where I can win, which ought to make everybody here happy, because when he said, why do you want to be here? He said, I want to play with winners. And this has happened over and over and over with every single person we've talked to, like that is new, that is coming in here. The first thing out of their mouths, well, there's two things. One, Jaden Daniels. Two, you can just tell that culture that we talked about, that we see, that I lived through last year and know is beyond real. It's why I was screaming special season week 4, week 5. I could just see it, that it was happening, that the rest of the league knows about it too. Man, things can change fast. I mean, can change really, 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 really fast, that it's kind of just widely known that this is where you want to be.
The quote of the offseason was Will Harris. We didn't talk about his presser, I think, but Will Harris, he was the one that said, we noticed how close the team was standing on the other sideline. And that's the one that got me. I was like, okay, this is palpable. He basically said, we could feel how they were playing for each other, being in the other team's jersey. Like, that to me is one of the biggest factors. And it's not like the Saints are the Cowboys or the Giants or the Eagles, where you do band together a little bit to play against your rivals.
Yeah.
This was a game against the Saints off of the bye week, right? Wasn't that the first game off of the bye this year?
Off the bye week, Saints were playing that quarterback that, shouldn't be playing. And,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, like, I looked at that by going, that to me is actually the money quote of the offseason, is somebody that played against them said, yeah, I want to be a part of that team, not a part of this.
Yeah. And I mean, like, he has experience with this too. 2 years ago, he was with Detroit. Detroit had the juju going for them, where everybody wanted to be there, bite the kneecaps, the whole thing. You could see the chemistry is there too. So he would know it when he sees it. And this is what's been happening with everybody who's come in here. They've all said we want to be. I mean, everybody always says the right thing, but they've all said it effusively about it. Not that it's not obvious, and it wasn't obvious to me too. So it doesn't mean that they're all going to incorporate and they're all going to buy in again. Like, that process starts over again.
Sure.
But we'll have to see. And it's off to a good start. That's for sure. Because there are a lot of new faces, a lot of new personalities. One of them talks in the third person. Everybody's been in their own experiences. Javon Kinlaw has got links back to San Francisco, but has had a rough, really start to his career after being a first-round pick. He's here to kind of prove it. I love that, Deebo says, I'm motivated. That's a really good thing to hear. And I think contractually they have him in a motivated situation. He's not getting a contract like that again if he doesn't perform this year. The incentives are a small part of it, but they are there. But in reality, he's in a contract year with this team. And, again, this is another thing that you have to watch. But so far, they've handled contracts very well. I haven't heard anybody get mad at them yet. Though I guess Diami probably a little bit, and Dante Fowler.
Yeah.
Dante Fowler didn't like it, but go look at what he got on the open market. It was under 10 million. I don't know what he's asking for, but it was under 10 million a year. So the sack number for him didn't carry the same weight that it would carry for a Trey Hendricks and a Myles Garrett for reasons. And he didn't want to see that. He felt he was, I guess, disrespected in some way. So he goes back to Dallas and he gets to play against us a couple times a year. But he didn't get the deal, I think, that probably he thought he was going to get. So, but he's the first one. And in that case, Peters and company proved out to be right. I don't know what he was asking for, but clearly, because like that number's not very high. So that clearly proved out to be right. On Diami, like similarly, and I felt this way going into the offseason, I'm like, he's going to get a contract from somebody that's going to be a number that they're not going to give him. And he got it. And it's like, I wish him the best of luck, but I don't think for a second like that I would be comfortable paying him $10 million a year. And I think that's where they landed on this. With Deebo, this is an interesting one because he sits there and he says out loud, I am motivated to show you what you got in me. But most of the time, stars at this stage of their career want security and want longer contracts. He didn't get one of those, and he still put a smile on his face, said he's ready to play. So that's a good sign too.
Well, it also tells me that he's on the same page with where his career's going, and the team has probably told him that. Like, hey, ball out with us, and if it's not us that pays you, somebody's going to pay you on the other side. We talked about the wide receivers that now you can kind of cycle through them a little bit, but everyone knows what he's capable of. If he plays well, he's going to get paid somewhere, and it might not be here, but it's going to be somewhere else. So the act of good faith, I think, helped here as well for them to go, hey, we're going to guarantee this money. We're not going to mess around with you. And then we'll talk about it on the other side.
He's wearing number 1. I really wanted him to wear 19. That's the look I loved from him. And I know he wore it recently, but I'm like, I loved that look on him in San Francisco. I was hoping he would go back to 19, but that was just me.
Those of us that have Jahan Dotson jerseys, very thankful that he switched to number 1, so we don't have to get rid of number 1 jerseys. So I'm cool with that.
All right. I'll go back to Michael Gallup in a minute because that was the other news yesterday. But since we're on San Francisco for a minute, John Lynch did an interview and explained what's going on. And one of his lines, which I'd have to hear him say it because it sounds like it came with a level of tone that doesn't sound very right and is not going to go over very well. But the quote was, the fans need to understand there's this thing called the draft, okay, which is a really, really, again, I want to hear how he said it because it read like, I'm trying to tell you I know exactly what I'm doing here right now. This is one of those, we've been really good. We've made some choices here. We know this doesn't look like we're going to be the same team we've been the last few years. And that's done on purpose, but don't worry about it because on the other side, we're going to be fine. They have a lot of draft picks to use. They've totally reset here. It's probably going to be an up and down year at best for them. And he's trying to kind of grease the wheels he's pulling the Rizzo a little bit. I've done this before. I'll do it again. Trust me.
Yeah.
And we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. I mean, I think their fans, rightfully so, are freaking out at the amount of guys they've left, at the talent that they have that have left too, though. Like, it's a little warranted for them, of them freaking out. I understand with his point, hey, how do we get all these players? For the most part, they did draft them, but don't forget they did trade for McCaffrey and Trent Williams and some of the major pieces that they've gotten before. I would say the fan base is very right to be slightly freaking out at the moment. And I would hope he realizes that.
So Trent's old and, that's going to come to an end soon. McCaffrey is their Backstrom. Who knows if he'll ever be healthy again, honestly. He's going to play out whatever the contract. He's not going to retire. He's going to take the money. But will he ever really be able to play? I don't really know. Their best offensive lineman, young offensive lineman, just signed in Green Bay. He's gone, so they didn't want to give him the money. They just shipped Deebo off. Kittle is old and gets hurt all the time. We'll have to see what they think about with him. They're putting a lot of stock in young wide receivers. Ayuk, I think they would trade if they could, but he's off at ACL because they want to get out of that contract. And then defensively, Dre Greenlaw's a heartbeat type player and have been hurt a lot, but gone now. Hufunga's gone now. He's very good safety, Pro Bowl safety. He's gone now. Like Hargrave's gone now. I don't know, man. Like, I'm not sure. Like, this is a full reset, in my opinion. And then he did insinuate, well, we got big things coming. That's Brock Purdy's contract, of which, man, I mean, if you kind of look at the situation, when he's driving a Ferrari with Deebo, Kittle, Ayuk, McCaffrey, that offensive line anchored by a Hall of Fame left tackle and a really, really, really good defense, well, you don't need him to be Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson. But when he's not given something like that, are you seriously going to pay him $50 million a year to quote unquote elevate everybody else? I don't know, man. I don't think they're thinking this thing completely through at this point. I might trade him at this juncture and go in a different direction and get away from that level of a contract. But that one sounds like the ownership wants him to be their quarterback long term. And I think Lynch is just kind of selling off the parts to make that happen, even if it's not in their best interest long term.
I have said this all offseason. I thought they should have been calling up the Giants or calling up the Vikings or someone else to work. Yeah, the Jets to work a trade out. Like, I don't think you hand a guy like that the money. I'm sorry.
I don't either. Unless
I
you have a crazy team around him.
Right. But like, we saw it. They went to the Super Bowl. It went to overtime. Who ended up winning that Super Bowl? It was the Chiefs and Mahomes. Like, yeah, it stayed close. It was a lower scoring game, but I'm not putting that guy up against the elite quarterbacks and having him last, in these really big matchups. Like, this is he's a little bit like Darnold. Darnold had a great regular season. I still don't trust him in an elite matchup of quarterbacks. I just don't. And so when that happens, I don't think you get the money like that. And look at Darnold. He didn't really get the money. He had a 1-year prove-it deal, essentially, that could turn into 3 if it all works out, which hopefully it does for him. But I look at Purdy in the same light. I don't see him elevating a team like that with how much talent is on there.
I don't either. I think, but this is where it sounds like the ownership has stepped in, and the ownership has said this is the guy that they want to be their quarterback. And I don't want to undersell him because we've played against him and I've prepared for him a couple of times. He's a really good player. Like I think he gets hit over the head a little too much, but I don't know that he's a person who elevates everybody. Yeah. He's not Mahomes. He's not Burrow. You can go one of two ways. The people are complaining about what the Bengals did are only complaining because they're saying Burrow is so good that he didn't need to sign both of the receivers. I would have kept Chase and thought about Higgins because whoever number 2 is just going to be great because Chase is on the opposite side and Burrow's the quarterback. You can go one of two ways here. In a situation like Purdy, I look at him and I go, you need Higgins and Chase to make him look really good. And that's where I think the problem is here. Like, I don't think they're thinking about this. I think the ownership has stepped in clearly because they've said, clear out some of this money. The reporting came out a year ago. They didn't like how much money was being put out there in the marketplace to keep their team together. They took a shot at one more run. It went bust because of injuries more than anything. Now they have to pay the quarterback. And they've decided to go, all right, cut all of the older or expendable talent so that we can make sure that he gets signed. But on the other side of it, he's going to play with not top tier talent. How's that going to work out for you? And mark this year down. This is the year they slip and go completely the wrong direction for probably a 3 to 5 year window.
Oh, 100%. If they actually agree to that contract with him, like it's over. Like, I don't foresee them being that good. I don't believe in him. The level of talent they have, I don't think they're ever going to get back to it either. And good luck trying to kind of refill, the bucket with the talent that you had around him. You're not going to be able to do it. So no. Yeah, I don't think they should. But at the same time, you don't have a backup plan. So that's the other thing that other NFL teams always shoehorn themselves into is when they don't have a backup plan, they just have to roll with what they have. And that's what is always the beginning of the downfall.
I mean, honestly, if I were them, based on everything that was going on and you're totally resetting and you can get actually a decent quarterback in a latter part of the draft, I might think of it that way. Like, I don't know who Kyle likes, but they turned Purdy into this. Start the clock over again. I mean, that would just be, considering what they're doing, they're going to make their bed with Purdy. He's going to make $50 million a year. They're not going to have the talent level around him, at least not in the short-term interim. So they're asking him to elevate people. I don't see, and I like Purdy. I think he gets hit over the head a little too much, but he's not that. And I think that's where the mistake is going to be. And it's going to slip them the wrong direction for a few years until they figure it out. Is what's going to happen. That's what I think.
If it is truly ownership too, it could sabotage the whole operation. Because if it's just ownership and Kyle and Lynch are going, we could go elsewhere with this, and they kind of force Purdy onto them, You know how that works
Well,
too. That's
the nightmare is like Kyle Shanahan ends up coaching the Giants.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yes.
Because 100%. He looks at this and he goes, I can't win here. And they go, okay, come here, blank slate.
Right. We're going to get Arch next year or whatever it's going to be. Right. Like
we actually have really good defensive players right now.
Yep. Right. So that's what I actually like. I hope doesn't happen because I don't want that guy going elsewhere because it's going to be a problem.
Shanahan's going to ask to be traded.
Yeah, right.
He has to be traded. Right. All right. Let's see. Last one here. Michael Gallup did sign out of retirement. Obviously has a relationship with Quinn and Witt, was in Dallas for a number of years. We know him well, opposite of CeeDee Lamb, who's a very, very good number 2 receiver for a long time. But he's not even 30 yet. But he retired last year. He had some injuries, ended up leaving the Cowboys, went to the Raiders, retired during training camp, took the whole year off, came back out of it, did a Zoom yesterday, admitted I wasn't really in the right mind frame last year when I made this decision. I still have a lot more to give. And in this case, I'll believe it when I see it. Like, I hope they're right about that. I think he's an upgrade from where they are. Like, they still needed to fill out. They didn't even have a full stable of professional wide receivers on the roster because of all the different movement that's happened to this point. They haven't re-signed Jamison Crowder. Zacchaeus left. Diami signed elsewhere. They needed to find more bodies. So to me, what this is a show me in camp situation. Show me that you are dedicated to being back to where you were. I'm always like, listen, I'm someone who quit a job in the middle of my career for a lot of different reasons that I don't need to go through. And here I am now on the other side, still doing this every day and wanting to do this. So I'll be the first one to go, I hear you on you made a decision at a point in your life and you did something, and whether you regret it or not, whatever, you're going to put it full forward. But most people who do this, their heart might not totally be into it. And you only really find out when it gets push comes to shove. And Quinn knows how to get push comes to shove. And we'll find out very quickly. So this is either a steal, a total steal that they got him for like the veteran minimum.
Yeah. Yep.
Or it will tell itself very quickly in camp, does he really want to do this again? And I hope the answer is A, he does, because if he does, they have a really good veteran wide receiver who at times was a really good number 2 wide receiver on a veteran minimum contract. So this could be a steal.
Yeah, I think that was the number one thing that jumped out at me yesterday when he signed. It was a vet minimum deal. And I'm like, you could do way worse with vet minimum deals than with Michael Gallup coming into training camp and competing. And I liked his candor when he was asked about the retirement thing. He actually he didn't go in I didn't like the Raiders. It was, I had a bad time transitioning of not being on the Cowboys. And I think that's good for him for admitting that he was kind of uprooted from his normal routine going to a new team and his heart just wasn't in it at the time. I respect the candor there. I'm with you. I'll believe it when I see it, but they could have done far worse for a guy on a 1-year vet minimum deal than Gallup.
Yes. No, I think this is once again a low risk signing with a high reward propensity. They had a knack for this in year 1. Austin Eckler, low risk signing. Bobby Wagner, low risk signing, huge upside on the other side of it. I'm not sure that, even the way it stands now, because Deebo's out there, Terry, Deebo, Noah Brown is back. If he's healthy, I think we know what he can do in this offense. He's number 4-5, coming into all of this. But you know how it goes. Brown got hurt. Deebo had some injuries he had to deal with. He's going to play. So we're going to find out fast. And this could be, it's low risk. If he finds out, you know what, I really don't want to do this, it's not going to hurt them at all, because they didn't really put any resources into it. And if he does get his game back, his motivation back, wants to play, this could be a hit. And so I think it's a really good low-risk thing that they did yesterday, and let him compete in camp. You'll find out within a few weeks of training camp whether he really wants to be there or not. And if he does, he should be number 3 or 4 on the roster overnight. He should be competing with Noah Brown. 4 reps is what should be happening after a couple of weeks of camp if it's going really well.
Yeah, this is I think it's worth reminding people about the Deebo effect, that Deebo pushes everyone back a spot in a slot on the wide receiver chart. This makes it even better that it's basically going to be Noah Brown, Gallup, and McCaffrey probably competing for the rest of those spots realistically. We'll see what happens, with anyone else they bring in. I'm completely at peace with that, looking at what they had as the number 2 wide receiver last year. I'm all right with this.
Yeah, no, I think look at the corner unit as it stands right now. Look at the wide receiver unit as it stands now. And don't tell me that has been dramatically improved on both sides. Now, there are some risks. You need Lattimore to look like Lattimore from a couple of years ago. You need Jones to still play to the same degree, and he's over 30 now. But the wide receiver unit, think about the group that they put out there last year. Think about the group they're about to put out there this year, and they may not be done yet. Like, they have dramatically overhauled these positions very, very quickly within a year. All right, one more quick NFL thing, because I talked about rules yesterday that were submitted. I didn't get to this one. The Eagles submitted one where they want the regular season OT expanded in the way that the playoff OT is expanded, where both teams will get at least a possession unless a touchdown. They want both teams to get at least a possession, and they're asking for I think the clock to go to 15 minutes. So that's what they want. To me, I saw Pro Football Talk did a breakdown of it, and they said something to the effect of it would be like 20 to 30 extra plays over the course literally of a season if everything stayed like as usual. So it's really not that big of an expansion. But do we want teams to get 2 possessions regardless and then have the larger propensity for more ties? I don't think I'm totally down with that. I actually think they ought to leave it the way it is, or do what my recommendation has been all along, which is don't change the rules. Just take the clock away. And that way you won't have a tie. And you can have the clock run up to mark how long it took for the win to happen, just for historical perspective. But if you're trying to get rid of ties, which I think the NFL should try to get rid of ties, then I think you should just take the clock away. And then the clock doesn't matter. And you play by whatever rules you determine overtime gets, whether both teams get a possession unless there's a touchdown or both teams get a possession, period.
Yeah, I think the going 1 possession each is fine if we're going to go this way where both teams get a chance. I think that's a fine way to do it. It was funny. Like, I still point to this last year where the Commanders, remember, they almost took up the entire overtime period and then they scored a touchdown anyways. So it didn't matter. So if they do go, both teams get a shot, even if it's a touchdown. I'm with you. Like, there's no point of really having the clock. I remember when that was happening, I was like, if I'm the Commanders, I'm just trying to run this clock down now because you can actually just kick a field goal and there's not enough time for them to go down. Ertz ended up scoring and it didn't matter. But that was one of the first times I remember like watching the clock as that overtime period was coming to a close. Was like, they kind of have to score here or else there's not going to be another possession. It's going to be a tie.
Yeah,
so
my recommendation is let's get rid of ties. And the easiest way to do that is just take the clock off. And then you guys could determine what do you think is fair in terms of should both teams possess the ball, or if the first team who gets it scores a touchdown wins. Make your choices of what the rules are. But if you just remove the clock portion of it, then you will get a winner. And you'll get it in short order. Like, because if you don't score the first time the other team gets the ball, they kick a field goal, they win. So it's not like anybody will be like playing longer than necessary. They're all going to want to get off the field anyway. So that's that would be my suggestion to the competition committee. All right, let's take a quick break. Bray wants to show ESPN 630, the Sports Capital. All right. Well. We've got a full Palace Coup in College Park there, hon. So the day before, well, there's been some rumblings over the last, I don't know, I guess week or so, at least from the people that I've watched that cover the team very closely. Jeff Erman's very good with this, with his Maryland site. And he's been talking about this for about a week, where he said Damon Evans, the AD, has been in talks with SMU to become their next athletic director. And then Kevin Willard may or may not have been being pursued for the Villanova job or maybe some other jobs. But then the reporting turned to Maryland is going to go out of their way to make sure that they keep him. So they're going to make him contractually happy. And so I didn't think much of it. I probably should have, but I didn't think much of it. And in hindsight, I'm like, to go from Maryland to SMU doesn't feel like an upgrade.
Right.
Albeit they have some extremely wealthy alums, and they were doing NIL before it was legal to do NIL. So, like, they've lived in that world forever. So maybe, I don't know, who knows? Or maybe they're going to pay him a ton of money. Like, I didn't think much of it. But now, in light of what happened yesterday, it's all making sense that Willard's forcing him out. And that's become clear not only in just reporting, but what he said, which was, I couldn't believe I heard a coach say the things he said. And I should have just played it, but I'm going to read to you what he said during the press conference yesterday. And he was asked about all the rumors and the coaching status. And he talked about how he was given a term sheet before Selection Sunday. And he said he wasn't focused on it. He's been focused on the team, and they talked to agents. And then he said this. He goes, I talked to Damon Evans this morning at length about where we are. Obviously, this is a quote. It's difficult right now because I think we know his situation. He's probably going to SMU. So it's kind of tough to negotiate with somebody that maybe is not here. But I need to make fundamental changes to the program, and that's what I'm focused on right now. That's why probably a deal hasn't got done, because I want to see the fundamental changes. I want this program to be great. I want it to be the best in the country. I want to win a national championship, but there's things that need to change. When you're at a place for 3 years and you put your heart and soul into it, you kind of sit there and say, okay, wait a second. For us to be really successful, X, Y, and Z needs to change. And first and foremost, I need to make sure that that's where we are with NIL and rev share. And it's not been with NIL over the past 2 years. We've been one of the worst, if not the lowest, in the NIL the last 2 years. So that's first and foremost. And I also have to make a fundamental change where I can do the things that I want to do with my program. I wanted to spend an extra night in New York this year to celebrate Christmas with my team, and I was told we can't do that because it's too expensive. So I don't know how we can be a top-tier program, and I can't spend one extra night in New York because it's too expensive. Then he goes on to just kind of reiterate that there's fundamental things that he wants to deal with.
He mentions the word rev sharing, by the way. He mentions that phrase. So I just want to say
rev sharing, NIL. I've heard this about Maryland, that they haven't quite hit their stride with figuring out how to deal with NIL. That is on them, and that is on the AD to some degree too, or I don't know, the lack of a quote unquote general manager. Maybe they need someone like that. I don't really know, but this was extraordinary to hear him literally say publicly, well, I don't know who I'm negotiating with because this guy's probably out anyway, which was, we now know who the mob boss in College Park is, because he just said publicly, the AD is not going to be here. I don't even know why I'm talking to him. And I don't really think I should be talking to him anyway, because he's not in line with what we need to do to get done. Goodbye. And I couldn't believe it when I saw that.
I was just shocked that he went into as much detail as he did, like telling that New York story embarrasses Evans as far as I'm concerned, to say like, this is your top two sports are football and basketball, and you couldn't pony it up for them to stay in New York for Christmas. Like, man, that's an embarrassment if you're Evans there. So the fact that he went into that level of detail, and like, I don't want to put words into his mouth, but this does seem like it's almost a little bit bitter towards the football side of things. Like, you and I have talked about Locksley, how they built a brand new facility, state-of-the-art facility that is like one of the best in all of college sports. And we've seen how much money they just pump into football. And I always joke with you by going, I don't know why they do that, because they come out with the same record every single year. I think this is him going, we need to have a little reset here of like, what is successful and what actually makes you money and what you should be pumping the money into. That's how I read it yesterday a little bit. I know he didn't say it. And like the NIL stuff too, that seems to be a mess at this point, because they're not the only school that's having trouble with this, right? Like, there are a lot of schools around the country that have been
UVA is having a lot of problems with it. A lot of people are having a lot of problems with it. Yeah, of course. Because like, listen, if you were one of the groups that was kind of already doing that,
right?
You just kind of slipped right into it. But when you were one of the programs that wasn't already doing that, not to that degree, well, it's a transition for you.
Right, exactly right. So I think this is him also going, we got to figure this out. I'm not seeing the movement I need to be seeing on this. And he's probably also, I'm going to guess there's a little bit of him that's going, look at all the alumni we have that are willing to spend money with our program. Why is this not translating to my program? Like, there's a disconnect there that I think that he's finally had enough of. And he's like, we need to hit the reset button here.
Major, huge alumni base, Washington, D.C. metro area. Why aren't we winning on this front? And you know what? I think he has every right to ask that question. And I don't have a problem with that. To be fair, there was money already spent to build the new basketball facility. So it's not like that, like football got this amazing palace and they didn't. Like, that is actually coming and happening. It's probably the NIL and the rev share thing where he's pissed off because he doesn't feel like they can get the players that they need to win a national championship, and only he knows the answers to that. And while he was very specific, he was also very non-specific. I will say this just because I know people who I'm friends with that have worked in and around the program to try to help them with their collective and all that stuff. It just hasn't taken yet, but it's not for a lack of trying. They are trying to do these things. It just hasn't worked out. I just found that astounding that he basically kicked the AD out the door and said, that's it, which means Willard must have in mind who he wants to be the AD of the school. I don't know who that is, but I'm going to assume it's somebody who is probably somewhere that's killing it in NIL, but needs a bigger opportunity. That like he went from Seton Hall to here. There must be whoever that person is at whatever school that is. He wants to go grab them and bring them here. That's what must be happening now. For Evans, it looks like he has no choice now but to take this. And for SMU, that's embarrassing for them to hear that publicly where he goes, we're kicking this guy out the door. I hope for Evans' sake, I hope they don't have cold feet on him now because they hear this and he's going, we don't have things going here right. You take this guy. And they're probably like, excuse me, we've been doing NIL since the 80s, brother. It's all under the table. So I don't even know, like, we don't need to be told that this guy doesn't know what he's doing, which is what Willard is insinuating by doing something like this. And then the other big question to me is this. Yes, all these changes are coming at the behest of Kevin Willard and the basketball program. What does this mean for Mike Locksley if Evans is indeed kicked out the door? Because when the new AD comes in, there's going to be some fresh eyes on that football program overnight, whoever that may be.
No, and I mean, on your point of Evans leaving, this is always the best drama of college sports of like, now this program has to explain to their fans why he's such a big deal when the coach just eviscerated him on the way out. Like that's the best part about college sports always, because whenever you get someone like that, because SMU, I would say, puts themselves on a pedestal. Like they are a little bit like Maryland. They don't need to tell their fans that this guy's the best or whatever. For Locks, this was my first thought yesterday. Like this was my first thought process was, this feels like a little bit of a power grab that like Willard's going to put his people there and they're going to take a look at that program and, mediocre is not going to be good enough anymore. I've told you, I've had gripes with Locks for like 3 or 4 seasons now that I just don't see it. Like he seems to be a great guy. He seems to be able to recruit, but it doesn't play itself out on the field. Sometimes they make it to a bowl game and everyone feels happy and fuzzy at the end of the year, but I haven't felt like they've made significant progress. I'm telling you,
they're not competing for Big Ten championships. They're not even close to it.
No, and that's what I'm saying. There's going to be some coach that comes along and goes, I get to play Ohio State and Michigan every year and play in that, conference. Sign me up. Let's go. I want to go to work here. And that's where I think this is where Locksley could be a little bit in danger here. That if the right guy comes along, they could put him in.
Yes, but I will say this for next year because he got one of the top-rated quarterbacks to agree to come to play at Maryland.
100%.
So
100%.
The last thing anybody knew is going to do walking in is saying, well, I don't want to see this for myself because you don't want to endanger that level of an athlete, especially when your moneymaker should be football. You want to see how that plays out. But that gives Locks the runway of a year or two again, where it's like, well, I mean, look, as of a couple of years ago, they had the best quarterback in the Big Ten. They didn't win with him either.
Nope.
You're like, they didn't win with him. So they bring in this freshman, and I'm hoping for the best with them. And hopefully he does really well, and hopefully they win. Past history suggests that it won't be that way, but who knows? But if you're a new AD coming in, you got to give him the chance. Like, if he has this level of a quarterback playing for him because he recruited him to come here based on no past history of winning, well, you got to give him a chance. But I think it's going to be the runway is going to be a lot shorter than it's been up to this point. I've been asking this question for a lot of years. I like Mike a lot. Like, I've been invited to his house. I think he's a really nice guy. I think he's an outstanding recruiter. It just doesn't translate onto the field. And at some point, you do have to win, and win at a bigger clip. Like, what's the reasonable expectation? Could they have years where they are 3rd or 4th place in the Big Ten? People feel really good about that. Maybe they get lucky when they have a quarterback like this and they get to 2nd place. They just couldn't beat Ohio State, or they just couldn't beat Michigan, or whoever it was, but they're kind of right there and they're ranked at the end of the year. I think that would be a reasonable expectation for them, but they don't even do that. Right. That's like, to me, that's what I want to see. Like, for me, it's not about winning the Big Ten. Like, good luck with that. If they could build something that does that, incredible. That clearly is not, there's no trajectory to that. But could they be in the top 4 every year or close to every year? Could they have a really big year when they have a quarterback like this and become second and get a really good bowl? Maybe not the playoffs, but a really good bowl. Like, I'd like to think that that's possible. And I have not seen anything even remotely close to that yet. So I do think he's going to be in trouble when someone else comes in here and gets fresh eyes on this and goes, I value winning, period.
I'm also sick of the like, oh, well, we played Penn State really close that one game, or we played Ohio State or Michigan really close that one game. Take them out every once in a while. Like, I always joke with you, Maryland people always freak out because they win their first 3 games and then they get Ohio State or Penn State or Michigan the 3rd or 4th week of the season at College Park. And I'm going, here comes the reckoning. But everyone wants to get all pumped up, and they don't usually just lose. They get destroyed too. That's where you and I always make fun of them, is because it's not like they play them close. They lose 54-7 in College Park. Like, that's where my disconnect has been here too. It's not even like there's a bunch of games that are close and it just didn't go their way. It's that in those big games, they get throttled by those Big Ten schools that are really, really good. And that's just unacceptable to me. Like, at least be competitive in those ones.
I did see this online. A lot of people did this, and I'm not surprised. Scott Van Pelt for, I don't think AD, because that's a total, trust me, Scott, you don't want that job. you do not want to deal with the field hockey team. But GM of the basketball team, well, that actually might make some sense. So I'm open to that idea. If he wanted that on his plate, he'd have to quit ESPN to do something like that, which I can't imagine he'd want to do. But I would put some some merit into that. Not to be the AD. You're an administrator. Those people have been in the college systems forever that do that job. But the GM who comes in and tries to raise money, get players, I don't know. Scott might be good at that. I don't know.
Call up Woj. Ask Woj how life is right now. Woj seems like he's living life pretty grand right now. It seems like he likes it. So
how about Ron? Ron's doing it now.
Good luck with that. But call up Woj. Call up Woj on that one.
Yeah. All right, we'll take a quick break. Pray about the show. ESPN 630, the Sports Capital. All right, welcome back. Maryland does start play today. By the time you hear this, they may have played. It's 4:30 tip. So we're taping this in the morning against Grand Canyon. I did not love, obviously, what happened yesterday happening when it happened, because I have a lot of high hopes that Maryland has a run potentially in them, at least to the second weekend. And this seems like a distraction more than anything, but we'll see what happens starting today. Day 1 of the tournament, there was only one real surprise, unless you picked, I heard from all the punditry when I was filling out a bracket that Drake was a serious threat. Because of their style of play, they take every shot clock down to like under 5 seconds. And if you're in a close game with a team like that, you can lose. So I actually picked them. Not that I feel like I'm smart, but I picked them because the pundits told me to pick them. So I don't even think that one was that much of a surprise. The only one that was McNeese. And I don't know if you've seen much about this.
Of course manager. I have. Of course. I've known about him for a month.
This guy, he's unbelievable. He's great. They call him Aura. He's amazing. And like when they walk out of the locker room, he's got a giant boombox that's sponsored on him, walking out and they're all dancing and he's singing. It's like, yeah, they're going to win. So if there was ever a Cinderella I'm rooting for, it is them. God, do I want them to win the next game too.
That dude has 3 separate NIL deals. He doesn't play. That's incredible to me. Like, that's incredible to me. And if you're on social media like I am, I knew about him a month ago. Aura is the perfect word to describe him. Not surprised they took out Clemson. Honestly, not surprised.
The Celtics sold for more money than the Commanders did.
Yep.
So as it turns out, Josh Harris and company got a deal, because there's no NFL team that should, with owning their own stadium, that should be worth less than any NBA team. Sorry. So that's amazing.
Yeah. And the Celtics, the fact that they don't own TD Garden, the Bruins own TD Garden. So that didn't even include the arena. Right. So that tells you everything you need to say about that price too. It could have been a little higher had they had their own arena.
If that's what they go for, what would the Knicks or Lakers go for?
The Yankees. What do the Yankees go for? 15?
Cowboys.
15 billion, something like that.
I think the Yankees and the Cowboys, they're Picassos. There is no real price on them. They could go for 20 million. They could go for 800 million. I don't know. It could be anything. Literally anything.
Yep.
Let's see. Caps beat the Flyers yesterday. Unusually, they were a little lackluster in the third, held on.
Yeah.
They've been getting hot in the third, a little lackluster last night. Ovi scored again, so it's 7 away. So as you predicted, get back on track so we can get this record back on track.
No, 100%. This was a weird one because the Flyers, I get to talk to John before the broadcast, and he tells me what's going on. We're talking, and he's like, you should see the Flyers warming up right now. Like, they're not even moving. They don't even really want to be here. Like, that's what it was. And so I think what happened was the Flyers had such a slow start that when they turned it on in the third, I don't think the Caps were really ready for it. So I think
they thought they were just going to have a nice brother-in-law game where you're just like, hey, we won't embarrass you. Just don't try to come back.
Well, no, I think it was just the Flyers weren't really trying. So the Caps were like, all right, we'll just play our game and stifle you a little bit. And then what happened was I think they had been shut out 2 times in a row. And I'm guessing Torts finally lost his you-know-what in the second intermission. And they came out firing. So they scored 1 goal. And then the second goal was weird. I don't know if you saw the review on that, but really probably shouldn't have happened. It got close. Caps locked it down. I'm not panicking about them. Big boy hockey tomorrow, though, with the Panthers. That's going to be a nice matchup to see, like, how they match up with them. If the Panthers have their full deck and Marchand is playing, like, let's see how they match up against them. That's big boy hockey tomorrow at Cap One. 5 o'clock puck drop, too. 5 o'clock puck drop. That's a nice time for tomorrow.
Very hopefully. Well, it's the NHL playoffs. Who knows? That's very possible Eastern Conference final matchup. But you know how hockey goes. Like, anybody could lose in any round. There's no certainty in that sport whatsoever, ever.
The best part is this is one of the times where I will like the new playoff format instead of like reseeding and everything. You can't play the Panthers until the Eastern Conference Final. So I'm all right with that one. Like, avoid them at all costs until it absolutely counts.
Yep. All right, everybody. Have a good weekend. Talk to you on Monday. Bram wants to show ESPN 630, the Sports Capital.